Hello, I'm just making a short video to express my gratitude to everybody and your response to my forgiveness emails that I sent out. I think it was Kelly that said this is a lot of information to take in, and it is a lot of it, and I have a lot of respect for that comment because it is can be very overwhelming and quite isolating and trauma inducing. Um, so I just wanted to offer a couple of things that I'm using that have helped me that may also be have helped other people. Um, One of which, and Mary and I went to hear the author speak, was before I composed these emails. I this book is called Conflict is Not Abuse, and it's written by a feminist scholar, Sarah Schulman, who's here in New York, and she's an educator and an activist with ACT UP and founder of an organization that helps document the stories of the activism that was done around AIDS activism specifically and ACT UP. Her perspective is, I find, very interesting because she's looking at conflict and abuse in the social realm and really sorting through what is actual abuse and what is just conflict. And as part of that, she draws parallels on things that are happening in the outer world, but she encourages her readers who are seeking peace in the outer world, who consider themselves to be ambassadors for peace, to look within their own families, look within themselves, and make peace there first. So, even though sometimes this doesn't apply, like for instance, if you're abused, this doesn't really have to do with you. However, if you want to sort through what may be actual abuse, which you may not be able to do a lot about, and conflict, which you can actually engage and help to heal. I think this is a really, really great resource. I finished it recently. If somebody once we can pass the book around, and if somebody is interested, I'll mail it to you. I'll send it to you. It's a good read. It's not a difficult read, and it's not super scholarly or anything like that. It's her point of view, her observations, and I think she just gives a lot for folks to think about. The other book that I'm currently reading is called Our Fathers, and I was very fortunate, to meet the author of this book. He is not just a writer and a scholar, but he's also a filmmaker, and his film How to Survive a Plague was nominated for an Academy Award several years ago. He's a friend of one of my professors at school, and so I've got to spend time with him, and I got to hear about some of his research. But I finally broke down the other day and just went and bought the book. I got it secondhand for about $8. It's thick, but it's very well written because he writes about it, even though he is using the historical information. He's writing about it in a more of a storytelling format. So it's personal and really accessible, especially if you're Catholic. And it's fascinating because actually it gives some insight into these oppressive structures that have given rise to the types of abuse that Catholics have been witness to within the school system and from our priests. And I think it also, through that insight, provides, I'm going to put the book title right there, I think it provides a means for compassion and empathy in regards to things that just seems so insanely traumatic and horrifying. It's helping me right now, I should say, to reconnect to the humanity of these stories and these situations, because honestly, these types of traumas and abuses are intergenerational, and this is part of my research that I've done in the Native community, and now as part of my own thesis project, is really looking at how systems of violence continue from generation to generation. Really, really good example. If you just look at the history of our country, you have a lot of European immigrants coming over here who were escaping very oppressive circumstances. They came over here for religious freedom. They came over here, for economic freedom, for personal freedoms, and unfortunately, a lot of those same cycles of abuse that they escaped from Europe were perpetuated here in the United States against, primarily against, initially against Native Americans, and then eventually against people of color, both Latin Americans and African Americans. How to break that cycle of abuse, I think, first of all, just comes from awareness of knowing that these things exist and knowing where people are operating from, and that's why I made mention in in my email. If you read the one I sent to Kennedy, I made mention to the fact that Jeremiah and Elizabeth were raised in families where they were beaten, and that was just how child rearing was done back in the day. You'd go get the switch off the bush. If it wasn't thick enough, mom would get it for you. And yet, our parents decided to end that. They consciously chose to stop, and that's not easy to do. So I have a lot of respect for them, and in that attempt, I think they had a lot of success. When I look at how nonviolent, 5 out of 6 of my siblings were nonviolent, that were not, we don't use violence as a means to solve problems, and nor is it something that we are perpetuating, to my knowledge, on any of our children. Not that I've heard or been witness to, other than the stories of Chase, which were pretty horrifying. When he was calling me, this would have been in 2001. He was calling me rather regularly. I had a job where I had a toll-free number, and I provided it to him. And he would call me, and he would tell me about the abuse that many times, and describe the abuses that he was suffering under Kennedy and Angie, because Angie neglected to protect him. And according to Chase at that time, said, when I was like, "What's Angie doing?" It's like, well, Angie's afraid to get hurt too, so she lets me take the beatings. And here's the key thing that happened during that period, which some of you may or may not know about or only have wind about. Chase asked for me not to say anything. Like, he's reporting this abuse to me, but he doesn't want anybody else to know. Well, that request was a very difficult one for me to honor. A, because of the nature of the abuse that he was suffering. B, the fact that I was at the time working in social services, so a mandatory reporter, meaning by law I'm required to report these abuses. And so I sought professional advice because I was concerned about the impact on Kennedy and Angie by reporting these things, that it might actually cause Kennedy to lose his job, that might negatively financially impact the family and create undue hardship. So at that time, I reached out to men in the family, and Lee and Jerry and Dylan, and I didn't really go into details. I just said, can you please reach out to Chase and just be there for Chase and let him know he's supported. And likewise, I did talk to Mom and Dad about it, and Mom was aware and said that Kennedy had been mandated to, and that the community or somebody was aware, the school was aware, Chase's school or someone, and that Kennedy, for whatever reason, had been mandated to anger management, which she didn't believe he had received any benefit from. At that time, Mom seemed kind of perplexed as to what she could possibly do. And again, this isn't about, I was frustrated with the situation. I was on another side of the country and felt very powerless to do anything. When Chase got out of the military, and I think for those of you who were at the 2006 family reunion, you know that he and I had a blow up right at the beginning. I was very concerned for his well-being, and I was very concerned for his knowledge of what we were doing in Iraq. I mean, it seemed very obvious to me there were no weapons of mass destruction. There was no connection to 9/11. All that seemed very apparent to me, and I was concerned that he was risking his life and well-being for what? And it seemed a big shift from when he was in high school. I don't know if you guys knew this about him, but when he was in high school, He was a peace activist. He was a vegetarian. He was into martial arts. I was perplexed as to how do you go from not eating animals to killing people. So that started our conversation, and it escalated. We ended up, separating and not really talking for the rest of the 2006 reunion. He did seek me out several years later, after several of his tours, Iraq and Afghanistan, and at that time he was, I think, really battling, PTSD and alcohol issues related to alcohol and his divorce. And he explained to me, this is the important part, he explained to me at that time that in retrospect he could see that his choice to enlist in the service was a response to the abuse that he suffered from Kennedy. He wanted to prove to Kennedy that he was a bigger man than he was, that he was a better man and more manly, more masculine, and that by joining the military he was going to do something Kennedy had never done. So this is, that for me was, Chase was very mad at me for not supporting his decision to enlist, but he said he funneled that anger at me toward his survival. He was going to survive so he could come back to the U.S. and say, F you, I survived in spite of your not wanting me to go. So if that was the motivation that kept him alive, fine by me. Had no problem with him being mad at me. Very glad that he and I reconnected. He came to visit me once in New York. We do not talk about military or anything related. We actually have very little communication. I did reach out to him after Mom reported being attacked by Kennedy, and I just let him know what was up, and that I was going to be speaking out, and I just, out of respect, couldn't remain silent about these things anymore. And as far as what people can do, if a lot of it can just start, I think, with yourself, of just being aware and also not allowing these things just to pass without some sort of calling out. For instance, this issue with Mom over the summer, where she's reporting, being attacked. These things should be taken seriously, and from my point of view, they should be taken seriously, because this is the recognition of what's going on, the calling out of what's going on, encouraging people to seek help is important. And there's nothing, though, we can't make people get help, and because of that, we just need, I believe, to just stay vocal and be willing to have these conversations and be a place and a person that someone could report such things to you. When I finish with this book, I am going to send it to Donnie. Donnie was abused. I don't know about Kennedy's necessary abuse in Catholic school priests. Donnie, I know, was raped by the headmaster of my school, Mr. Stork, Mr. Ed Stork, someone that was still at the school when I was there, and he and I had conversations about Donnie. I never really understood why Ed Stork was asking me about Donnie. I didn't understand the connection. I didn't learn about that, nor did I learn about his sexually abusing James until many years later, until almost like the year 2000. And I worked. I'm assuming people know that. I work from these assumptions, but I really should stop assuming. I'm assuming everybody knows that Donnie tried to molest me, that this happened to me when I was in high school, that he would not stop writing me, and he'd write me these horrible things I didn't want to read, and I just felt very harassed by him for many years, and he would seek me out if I was anywhere in the vicinity. One time he came all the way out to an airport to see me, and I was terrified to even see him. And then when I was about 18, when I was out in Colorado, he came back from an extended trip in Europe, and I demanded apology from him, and he admitted to what he had done. He apologized, and yet, there's that kind of psychological entrainment and those sort of triggers that have no doubt been created through his Catholic school and otherwise experiences. I don't know that you can just heal yourself from that. I mean, he likes to think that he did, but to this day, he still thinks that the rape that he endured by Mr. Stork was somehow like this amazing thing, that it was liberating for him, and that's the nature of rape. From people that you know and love, it can be very, very confusing. And what this book has helped me understand too is the culture of silence that perpetuates just non-action and perpetuates priests being able to continue abusing, and some of the crises that the Catholic Church is currently facing, because they're still paying out lots of money in lawsuits, millions and millions and tens and probably even hundreds of millions of dollars in lawsuits. So the book is by David France. It's called Our Fathers, and like I said, it's actually a very pleasant read. Although there are sections you just might have to put it down. Like sometimes it's not. Sometimes just even the talking about how kids were treated is pretty disturbing. I couldn't really watch it, and so right now I'm focused on my own healing. I've got my own cancer situation, that I'm dealing with as well, on top of other things. And I love all of you. The books again, Conflict is Not Abuse. If you're trying to figure out, is it abuse? Is it conflict? Is it conflict? Can I heal myself? Can I heal my family? And Our Fathers, David France. Thank you, everybody, for giving this a listen if you felt called to. And I love all of you. Thank you again for your support. And Happy Christmas. Happy New Year. Bye-bye.